For centuries, sailors have whispered about ships that should never have been found, vessels drifting silently across empty oceans with no distress calls, no signs of struggle, and no souls left aboard to tell their story. Some were discovered with meals still waiting on the table. Others appeared to have been abandoned only moments before they were found. In every case, the sea kept its answers. Tonight on Black 13, we venture into the world's darkest maritime mysteries to investigate 6 of the most chilling ghost ships ever recorded. These are true stories of vanished crews, abandoned vessels, and unanswered questions that have haunted the oceans for generations. So dim the lights, listen closely, and remember. Out on the open sea, there are places where the silence can be far more terrifying than the storm. Imagine standing alone on the deck of a merchant ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The sea is calm. The wind barely stirs the sails. Then through the morning mist, another vessel slowly emerges from the horizon. At first, nothing seems unusual, but as your ship draws closer, an unsettling realization begins to take hold. There are no sailors adjusting the rigging, no captain standing at the helm, no lookout scanning the waves. The ship moves with the wind as if guided by invisible hands. It is alive enough to sail, yet eerily empty. This is not a legend. It is the beginning of what many consider the greatest ghost ship mystery ever recorded, the story of the Mary Celeste. On December 5th, 1872, the crew of the merchant brig Dei Gratia spotted the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. From a distance, the ship appeared perfectly seaworthy. Its sails were damaged but still functional. The hull showed no signs of catastrophic damage. There were no signals of distress, no smoke, no indication that disaster had struck. Yet something felt wrong. Experienced sailors know that ships do not simply wander the open ocean without a crew. As a boarding party cautiously climbed aboard, they expected to discover injured sailors or perhaps victims of piracy. Instead, they found something far more unsettling: complete silence. The ship itself told a story that refused to make sense. The cargo, more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, remained largely untouched. Personal belongings were still neatly arranged in the crew's quarters. Valuable cargo had not been stolen. Food and fresh water remained on board in sufficient quantities. The captain's cabin still contained many of the family's possessions, including clothing and personal effects. Even the ship's sewing machine reportedly still held unfinished work. It looked less like people had abandoned the vessel forever and more, as though they expected to return within minutes. If piracy had occurred, why leave the valuables behind? If a storm had forced evacuation, why abandon a ship that remained capable of sailing? The only obvious clue was what was missing. The ship's single lifeboat had disappeared, along with the captain, his wife, their young daughter, and 7 experienced crew members. Navigation instruments, including the sextant and marine chronometer, were also gone, suggesting the captain may have intentionally ordered an evacuation. But why? The Mary Celeste showed no evidence of fire, explosion, or collision. There was water in the hold, but not nearly enough to threaten the vessel. Experienced captains understood the sea. Would such seasoned sailors truly abandon the safety of their ship for the uncertainty of a small lifeboat hundreds of miles from land? Or did they believe something aboard the vessel posed an even greater danger? As news of the discovery spread across Europe and America, theories multiplied. Some investigators suspected mutiny. Others blamed pirates, though nothing of value had been taken. There were suggestions of alcohol fumes escaping from the cargo, creating fear of an imminent explosion that never occurred. Some imagined rogue waves sweeping the crew overboard. Others proposed water spouts, seaquakes, or mechanical failures. And then there were the more mysterious ideas. giant sea creatures, supernatural forces, or strange phenomena beyond ordinary explanation. Every theory answered one question while creating another. If fear drove the crew into the lifeboat, what prevented them from returning once the danger passed? More than a century and a half later, the Mary Celeste continues to haunt maritime history, precisely because it refuses to fit neatly into any explanation. The sea has a way of swallowing evidence, leaving investigators with fragments rather than certainty. Every weathered deck plank, every untouched possession, and every missing logbook entry becomes part of a puzzle whose final piece has never been found. Perhaps the crew made a desperate decision based on incomplete information. Perhaps they encountered an extraordinary chain of events that left no trace. Or perhaps the truth disappeared with them somewhere beneath the endless Atlantic. That may be why the story of the Mary Celeste refuses to fade. It forces us to confront one of the ocean's oldest truths. The sea does not owe us answers. Somewhere beneath the waves lies the fate of 10 people who stepped away from the safety of their ship and were never seen again. Were they victims of a tragic miscalculation? Did nature deceive them? Or did they witness something so terrifying that abandoning a perfectly seaworthy vessel seemed like the only chance for survival? More than 150 years later, the Mary Celeste still drifts through our imagination, not as an abandoned ship, but as a haunting question that the Atlantic has never answered. There are places where the ocean seems determined to erase every trace of those who enter it. Off the coast of North Carolina lies one such place, a stretch of shifting sandbars, violent currents, hidden shoals, and unpredictable storms known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. For centuries, hundreds of ships have met their end here, swallowed by the sea and scattered across the ocean floor. Sailors feared these waters long before modern navigation existed, believing that once a vessel entered this region, fate itself seemed to take control. It was here, in January of 1921, that another ship drifted silently into history, the Carroll A. The Deering was a 5-masted commercial schooner returning from South America after delivering a cargo of coal. At first glance, it was an ordinary voyage, but even before the ship disappeared, subtle warning signs had begun to emerge. Reports surfaced that tensions between Captain William Merritt and members of the crew had created an uneasy atmosphere aboard. Later, after Captain Merritt became ill and was replaced by Captain William Warmel, witnesses noticed unusual behaviour among the sailors during stops along the journey. Was it simply the strain of months at sea? Or had something already begun unravelling aboard the vessel long before it reached the Carolina coast? On the morning of January 31st, 1921, the Deering was spotted hard aground on the treacherous Diamond Shoals. Through binoculars, nearby observers noticed something strange. The ship appeared deserted. No crew scrambled across the deck. No captain shouted orders. The vessel sat motionless as waves relentlessly pounded its hull. Rescue boats attempted to reach the schooner, but dangerous surf forced them back. By the time weather conditions improved enough for boarding parties to climb aboard, whatever had happened was already over. The ship had become a ghost. What investigators found only deepened the mystery. Every one of the ship's 10 crew members had vanished. Their lifeboats were gone. Navigation equipment, including the ship's logbook, sextant, and personal papers, had disappeared as well. Yet many everyday items remained untouched. Meals appeared to have been prepared. Clothing and personal belongings were left behind. There was no evidence of violence, no signs of piracy, and no indication that a catastrophic struggle had taken place. It looked as though the crew had simply walked away from a perfectly intact vessel. But why would experienced sailors abandon the relative safety of their ship in one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean in America? As word spread, theories emerged almost immediately. Some believed mutiny had erupted aboard the schooner. Captain Warmel was known as a strict disciplinarian, and rumours suggested tensions between officers and crew may have escalated into violence. Could the crew have overpowered the captain before abandoning ship? If so, where did they go? Others suspected pirates operating along the east coast during the Prohibition era. Smugglers and criminal organisations were active in nearby waters. But if pirates boarded the Deering, why leave valuable cargo behind? Why remove only the people while abandoning the ship itself? The investigation soon grew even stranger. 5 different US government agencies became involved, including the Bureau of Investigation, the organization that would later become the FBI. Investigators examined every possibility they could imagine: mutiny, piracy, communist sabotage, rum-running operations, even foreign espionage. Yet each theory collapsed under scrutiny. No bodies ever washed ashore, no survivors surfaced, no credible witness ever explained the crew's fate. The deeper authorities looked, the more the mystery seemed to dissolve into the sea itself. Could an entire crew truly disappear without leaving behind a single reliable clue? Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Carroll A Deering is how complete the disappearance was. Oceans often return fragments, wreckage, life jackets, floating debris, or at least traces of those lost. But in this case, there was almost nothing. It was as though the Atlantic had erased 10 human lives with deliberate precision. Imagine standing alone aboard that silent schooner after the rescue party arrived. The wind whistles through empty rigging. Waves strike the hull below. Every creak of timber suggests life, yet there is only absence. The ship feels less abandoned than interrupted, as though whatever happened occurred only moments before someone stepped aboard. More than a century has passed, yet the Carroll A Deering remains one of America's greatest maritime mysteries. Historians continue to debate what happened, but no explanation answers every question. Did fear drive the crew into lifeboats that never reached shore? Did mutiny spiral into tragedy? Or did the graveyard of the Atlantic claim another secret it refuses to surrender? The ocean has always been a keeper of mysteries, and some stories seem destined to remain unfinished. Every wave that breaks across Diamond Shoals whispers the same unanswered question. What became of the 10 souls who sailed aboard the Carroll A Deering? And why did none of them ever come home? The Pacific Ocean has a way of making even the largest ships feel impossibly small. Stretching across millions of square miles, its endless horizon offers little more than water, sky, and silence. It is a place where storms can appear without warning, where radio signals fade into static, and where entire vessels can disappear without leaving behind more than a ripple. On October 3, 1955, one such vessel, the MV Joyita, departed from Apia, Samoa, on what should have been a short cargo voyage to the Tokelau Islands. A routine journey of just a few hundred miles, a journey that, by every expectation, should have lasted only 2 days. Instead, it became one of the most haunting ghost ship mysteries ever recorded. The Joyita was no ordinary vessel. Originally built as a luxury yacht before serving in military operations during the Second World War, she had earned a remarkable reputation for one extraordinary reason. She was considered virtually unsinkable. Her hull contained layers of buoyant cork and sealed air chambers designed to keep the ship afloat even if it became heavily flooded. Experienced captains trusted her resilience. Sailors believed she could survive conditions that would send most ships to the ocean floor. Knowing this, ask yourself, if a vessel almost impossible to sink was later found abandoned, what could possibly have convinced everyone aboard to leave it behind? The ship carried 25 people, crew members, passengers, doctors, traders, and supplies destined for isolated island communities. When the Joyita failed to arrive on schedule, concern slowly grew into alarm. Days passed with no radio contact, then weeks. Search aircraft combed the Pacific. Naval vessels crossed enormous stretches of open water. Families waited for news that never came. The Pacific, vast and indifferent, seemed to have swallowed another ship whole. Yet unlike so many maritime disappearances, this mystery did not end with the vessel itself being lost. 5 weeks after the Joyita vanished, a merchant ship spotted something drifting hundreds of miles off its intended course. As rescuers approached, they found the Joyita still floating exactly as her builders had promised she would. But what they discovered on board was deeply unsettling. There was no crew, no passengers, no bodies. The vessel drifted silently across the sea, with no one left alive to explain what had happened. It had become a ghost ship in the truest sense of the word. The clues scattered throughout the vessel only deepened the mystery. The radios had been damaged and were no longer functioning properly. The ship listed heavily to one side after taking on water, yet it remained perfectly capable of staying afloat. Medical bags containing blood-stained bandages were reportedly found on board, suggesting that someone may have been injured before the abandonment. Several life rafts and the ship's launch were missing, implying that those aboard had deliberately evacuated. But why? If the Joyita was still floating and designed specifically to survive flooding, what danger seemed greater than remaining aboard the safest place in the middle of the Pacific? Investigators proposed numerous explanations over the decades. Perhaps mechanical failures convinced the captain the vessel was doomed. Maybe flooding damaged vital equipment, leaving the crew stranded without communication. Others suggested piracy, mutiny, or criminal activity connected to valuable cargo carried aboard. Some even wondered whether panic itself became the greatest enemy. Imagine standing on a listing deck hundreds of miles from land, unable to contact anyone, watching seawater slowly fill compartments below. Would you trust the engineers who built the ship, or your own instincts telling you it was about to sink? One desperate decision could have sealed the fate of everyone aboard. Yet none of these theories fully explain the silence that followed. Despite extensive searches, none of the 25 people aboard were ever found. No lifeboats washed ashore carrying survivors. No confirmed remains drifted onto nearby islands. The Pacific gave investigators the ship, but kept every person who had sailed upon it. The contrast is almost unsettling. A vessel built to survive was discovered exactly as designed, still floating against impossible odds. Its passengers, however, vanished as completely as though they had never existed. Nearly 70 years later, the Joyita continues to drift through maritime history as one of the ocean's greatest unanswered questions. It reminds us that the sea does not always claim ships. It sometimes claims only the people. Somewhere beyond the endless blue horizon, 25 lives came to an end under circumstances no one has ever been able to fully reconstruct. Did they abandon a vessel that would have saved them? Did fear cloud judgment? Or did something happen in those lonely Pacific waters that left no witness and no trace? Whatever the truth may be, the Joyita still carries it, silently floating through history, like a message from an ocean that refuses to speak. Most ghost ship stories belong to another century, born in an age when navigation depended on stars, paper charts, and instinct. It is easy to dismiss those mysteries as products of primitive technology or incomplete records. But what if a ghost ship appeared in the modern world, equipped with GPS, satellite communications, powerful engines, and every advantage of contemporary navigation? Would we still expect people to simply vanish without explanation? That question became terrifyingly real in April 2007, when a small Australian catamaran known as the Kaz II drifted silently through the Coral Sea with no one aboard. Unlike the legends of old, this mystery unfolded in an age when such disappearances were supposed to be impossible. The voyage itself seemed unremarkable. 3 experienced sailors, owner Peter Tunstead, along with Derek Batten and James Tunstead, set out from Airlie Beach for what was intended to be a leisurely trip along Australia's northeastern coastline. They were not inexperienced adventurers chasing danger. They understood the sea, knew the vessel well, and had carefully planned their route. Friends expected regular updates. Family members anticipated a routine return. Nothing suggested that within days, the Kaz II would become one of the most chilling maritime mysteries of the 21st century. On April 18th, a rescue helicopter spotted the vessel drifting aimlessly near the Great Barrier Reef. From above, everything appeared almost normal. The sails were partially raised. The engine was still running. The boat showed no signs of collision, storm damage, or catastrophic failure. Yet repeated radio calls went unanswered. As rescuers drew closer, an uneasy silence settled over the scene. They boarded expecting to find injured sailors or mechanical problems. Instead, they found something profoundly unsettling. The yacht was completely empty. Inside the cabin, the mystery only deepened. A laptop computer remained switched on. The GPS continued recording the vessel's course. Food sat on the table as though someone had been preparing to eat only moments earlier. Personal belongings remained neatly stored. Wallets, keys, clothing, cameras and equipment had all been left behind. There were no signs of violence, no blood, and no evidence of a struggle. One life jacket was missing, but the emergency beacon had never been activated. It looked less like a vessel abandoned in panic and more like a boat whose occupants had simply stepped away and never returned. Ask yourself this: if you believed your life was in immediate danger, would you leave behind the very equipment designed to summon rescue? Investigators carefully examined every possibility. Could one sailor have fallen overboard, prompting the others to dive in after him? It is a heartbreaking scenario, and one maritime experts consider plausible, but even that explanation raises difficult questions. Experienced sailors are trained to avoid entering open water unnecessarily. Why wasn't the engine stopped? Why did no one activate the emergency beacon? Why did the vessel continue sailing unattended for hours without anyone attempting to regain control? Every answer seemed to leave another mystery behind. The sea offered almost no clues. Extensive searches covered thousands of square miles of ocean surrounding the vessel. Aircraft scanned the water. Rescue crews searched remote reefs and coastlines. Yet the 3 men were never found. No bodies surfaced. No life raft drifted ashore. No floating debris marked the place where tragedy occurred. The Coral Sea, calm and beautiful on the surface, concealed whatever had happened that day. Like so many ghost ship mysteries before it, the water preserved the boat while erasing nearly every trace of the people who sailed it. What makes the Kaz II especially haunting is its unsettling familiarity. Unlike towering 19th century sailing ships, this was a modern vessel, equipped with technology designed to prevent exactly this kind of disappearance. GPS tracked its movements. Radios connected it to shore. Emergency systems stood ready to summon help. Yet none of those advancements could explain why 3 capable men vanished while their boat continued drifting quietly through open water. It serves as a chilling reminder that technology may reduce uncertainty, but it cannot eliminate the unpredictability of the sea. Today, the Kaz II has become known as the modern Mary Celeste, a title earned not through legend but through unanswered questions. Somewhere on the endless waters of the Coral Sea lies the final chapter of a story no one witnessed. Did one tragic accident set off an irreversible chain of events? Did panic overcome experience? Or did something occur in those quiet waters that investigators have simply never been able to reconstruct? The empty yacht still lingers in the imagination, because it forces us to confront an unsettling truth. Sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are not found on ancient ships drifting through fog, but on modern vessels where every tool for survival remained on board, waiting for hands that would never return. Some mysteries begin with a body, others begin with wreckage, but a handful begin with a single message, so disturbing that it echoes through history long after the radio falls silent. According to one of the most enduring legends ever told by sailors, sometime in the late 1940s, a desperate distress signal crackled across the airwaves somewhere in the Strait of Malacca. The voice was weak, broken by static, and terrifyingly calm. It reportedly said, "All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead." There was a long pause, then came one final sentence: "I die." After that, only silence remained. Whether every detail of that transmission is historically accurate has been debated for decades, but the story that followed has become one of the sea's most chilling legends. Nearby vessels allegedly altered course toward the source of the distress call. Eventually, one ship located the mysterious freighter, identified in later retellings as the Ourang Medan, drifting aimlessly on an unnaturally calm sea. From a distance, nothing appeared unusual. The hull floated upright. There was no visible fire, no signs of battle, no frantic crew waving for help. It simply rested upon the water beneath a grey sky, as though patiently waiting for someone to come aboard. Imagine approaching such a vessel after hearing that final transmission. Would you climb aboard, knowing the last words transmitted suggested everyone on the ship was already dead? According to the legend, the boarding party soon discovered an unsettling silence, unlike anything they had experienced before. Every member of the crew was said to be dead. Sailors lay where they had fallen across the bridge, engine room, and deck. The captain reportedly remained at his post. A radio operator was found beside his equipment, as though he had managed to send the distress call before collapsing. Most disturbing of all were descriptions claiming that many of the bodies wore expressions of profound terror. Their eyes were open, their faces were turned upward. Some accounts describe arms frozen in defensive positions, as if reaching towards something unseen. Whether these details grew through retelling or reflected an actual observation remains impossible to verify, but they are central to the legend. What could produce such a scene without leaving obvious signs of violence? Over the years, investigators and writers have suggested numerous explanations. Some propose that leaking toxic gases from poorly stored cargo, perhaps potassium cyanide or other dangerous chemicals, might have filled enclosed spaces, killing the crew suddenly. Others pointed toward carbon monoxide or other fumes capable of causing confusion, unconsciousness, and death. These theories attempt to explain the reported deaths without invoking the supernatural, yet they leave lingering questions. If poisonous gas were responsible, why did the rescuers reportedly board safely? And why were the expressions on the crew's faces described as though they had witnessed something horrifying before they died? Then the story takes an even stranger turn. As the legend tells it, members of the rescue crew began noticing unusual heat rising from below deck. Some reported smelling smoke or sensing that something aboard the vessel had become dangerously unstable. They immediately abandoned ship. Moments later, according to the tale, the Ourang Medan erupted in a tremendous explosion. Flames shot into the sky before the ship disappeared beneath the sea forever, taking with it every remaining piece of physical evidence. If that sequence truly occurred, it would explain why investigators never had the opportunity to examine the vessel in detail. But it also ensured that the mystery would survive largely through second-hand accounts rather than surviving artifacts. This lack of evidence is precisely why historians continue to debate whether the incident occurred at all. Researchers have searched shipping registries, insurance records, naval archives, and contemporary newspapers, finding inconsistencies in dates, locations, and even the ship's existence. Some conclude the entire story is maritime folklore that grew more elaborate over time. Others believe it may have been inspired by a real but poorly documented incident later embellished through retelling. The uncertainty has become part of the legend itself. The less that can be proven, the more room there is for imagination. And perhaps that is what makes the Ourang Medan so enduring. It forces us to confront the uneasy space between history and myth. Every sailor knows that the sea has always generated stories, some exaggerated, some misunderstood, and some rooted in genuine tragedy. But every now and then a legend survives because it touches something deeper than documented fact. It asks what we might do if we stepped onto a ship where everyone was gone, where silence felt unnatural, and where every face seemed frozen in fear. Would we search for answers, or leave before becoming part of the story ourselves? Whether the Ourang Medan was a real vessel lost to an unknown disaster, or a tale shaped by generations of seafarers, its place in maritime folklore is undeniable. Across the world's oceans, sailors still exchange stories of abandoned ships drifting through mist, unanswered distress calls carried by the wind, and vessels that seem to appear only long enough to leave behind another mystery. Perhaps the greatest power of the Ourang Medan lies not in proving what happened, but in reminding us that the sea has always blurred the line between reality and legend. And sometimes the stories that cannot be fully verified are the ones that refuse to be forgotten. Far above the Arctic Circle, where frozen seas stretch beyond the horizon and winter darkness can last for months, silence takes on a different meaning. Here, the wind howls across endless fields of ice. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, and entire ships can disappear beneath shifting pack ice without leaving a trace. Sailors have always respected these waters, not because they are haunted, but because they are utterly indifferent to human survival. Yet among the countless vessels lost to the Arctic, one ship became something else entirely. She was abandoned by her crew, and then refused to disappear. Her name was the SS Baychimo, and for nearly 40 years she drifted through the frozen north like a ghost. The Baychimo was a steel cargo steamer owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, carrying supplies and furs between isolated Arctic communities. In October 1931, while navigating near Alaska, she became trapped in rapidly forming sea ice. At first, there was little cause for alarm. Ships had been frozen into Arctic ice before. Crews often waited patiently for changing weather or rescue. But as conditions worsened and blizzards buried the vessel beneath snow, company officials concluded that the Baychimo would likely never sail again. The crew was evacuated, leaving the ship locked within what appeared to be an icy tomb. Or so everyone believed. Days later, an Arctic storm swept across the region with incredible force. When the weather finally cleared, something astonishing had happened. The Baychimo was gone. The place where the ship had been trapped now held nothing but fractured ice stretching toward the horizon. Had the vessel finally sunk beneath the frozen sea? Had crushing ice broken her apart? Searchers assumed the Arctic had claimed another victim. Then several days later, a hunter spotted something impossible on the horizon. There, drifting slowly through the mist, was the Baychimo herself, still intact, still afloat, and somehow free from the ice that had imprisoned her. That remarkable sighting marked the beginning of one of maritime history's strangest stories. Over the following decades, the Baychimo appeared again, and again, and again. Inuit hunters reported seeing her drifting silently between ice floes. Merchant ships encountered her hundreds of miles from previous sightings. Explorers boarded her, finding cabins eerily preserved, as though the crew had only recently departed. some salvaged supplies before leaving. Others attempted to tow her to safety, only to lose her once more when storms or shifting ice intervened. Each time she vanished, people assumed the sea had finally taken her. Each time, she returned somewhere unexpected. Imagine sailing through dense Arctic fog and suddenly seeing the silhouette of an abandoned steamship emerging from the ice. No smoke rises from her funnel. No footsteps echo across her deck. No lantern glows in her windows. Only the groan of steel against ice and the endless wind. Would you board her? Would curiosity outweigh caution? Sailors who encountered the Baychimo often described an uneasy feeling that lingered long after they left. It was not fear of ghosts, but something more difficult to explain: the unsettling sensation that the ship no longer belonged to the living world, yet refused to surrender to the sea. As the years passed, the Baychimo became woven into Arctic folklore. Some believed she was simply an extraordinary example of durable engineering carried by powerful currents and seasonal ice. Others whispered that the vessel had become cursed after being abandoned, condemned to wander the frozen north without a crew. The Arctic itself encouraged such legends. Endless white landscapes distort distance. Mirages appear over frozen seas. Fog can hide an object one moment and reveal it the next. In such an environment, reality often feels dreamlike. Could repeated sightings simply reflect chance? Or did the lonely ship acquire a reputation that caused every distant silhouette to become the Baychimo in the minds of those who saw her? The last generally accepted sightings occurred during the 1960s. After that, the ghost ship simply disappeared. Expeditions searched for her. Pilots scanned coastlines and drifting ice. Historians examined shipping records and satellite imagery years later, hoping to identify her final resting place. Nothing definitive has ever been found. Somewhere beneath Arctic waters, crushed beneath shifting ice, or perhaps resting on an isolated seabed, untouched by divers, lies the vessel that wandered alone for nearly 4 decades. It is remarkable to consider that a ship abandoned in 1931 survived longer without a crew than many ships survive with one. Perhaps that is why the Baychimo continues to fascinate us. Unlike other ghost ships whose mysteries revolve around missing people or unexplained deaths, the Baychimo tells a quieter, lonelier story. She became a ship without a destination, drifting through one of the harshest environments on Earth, appearing only long enough to remind people that she was still there before vanishing once more into the ice. Was she simply carried by currents and extraordinary luck? Almost certainly. Yet the image remains haunting all the same. An empty ship gliding silently across the frozen Arctic beneath a pale winter sky, waiting for the next traveller to glimpse her through the fog, and wonder whether some journeys are never truly meant to end.